Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and close your eyes. What you're about to hear are real incidents shared by people who experienced them firsthand. Some of these stories might sound unbelievable, but they actually happened. So sit back, relax, and listen carefully. In 2021, a 22-year-old boy named Daniel Carter living in Ohio, USA had just graduated from college. He had spent his entire childhood in the same house where he lived with his family. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood with large family homes and wide streets. The house had 3 floors. Daniel's bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and his window faced directly toward the street. His father's office was on the 3rd floor, where the street was also clearly visible. Daniel's father was a lawyer and often worked late into the night. Since childhood, Daniel had occasionally heard about incidents that seemed normal at the time, but later, when he started connecting everything, he began to think that maybe someone had been observing his family for years. The first incident happened when Daniel was in middle school. One weekend morning, as Daniel was going downstairs to get breakfast, he overheard his parents talking in a serious tone in the kitchen. He only caught his father saying, "It happened again." At that time, Daniel didn't understand what they were talking about. He asked, but his parents did not explain anything. A few days later, his older brother told him the full story. That night, Daniel's father was working in his office. It was around midnight when he looked out toward the street. He saw a black SUV moving very slowly down the road. It was moving so slowly that it looked like the car was just rolling forward. After a short while, the same car came back from the opposite direction. Then suddenly, the car parked directly in front of Daniel's house. Daniel's father watched it for several minutes, but no one got out. The car just remained there. After some time, he returned to work, but continued checking the window every now and then. Hours passed. There was no movement. Around 2 a.m., Daniel's father fell asleep at his desk. When he woke up at 5:30 a.m., the first thing he checked was the street, and the car was still there in the exact same spot. This time, he was truly shocked. He was certain that no one had gotten out of the car during the night. Shortly before sunrise, the car quietly left. At that time, the family did not take the incident very seriously. They thought maybe the driver was resting, or it was just a coincidence. But a few years later, another strange incident happened. Daniel was 15 years old at the time. One night, he was in his room, making music on his computer. His desk was right in front of the window. It was late at night when he suddenly looked outside toward the street. From a distance, he noticed faint movement of headlights. A few seconds later, he saw 3 cars slowly driving down the street. At first, it seemed normal. Then he noticed something strange. The people inside the cars started shining flashlights at the houses. The beams moved from one house to another. Then at one moment, the flashlight directly pointed toward Daniel's house. When the beam approached his window, Daniel instinctively ducked down below the windowsill. For a few seconds, the light reflected off the ceiling of his room. Then everything went dark again. After 20 to 30 seconds, Daniel looked out the window again. The cars were driving toward the end of the street, and then turned and disappeared. The next morning, Daniel told his parents about what he had seen. The family assumed that maybe a group was surveying houses in the neighborhood. After that incident, Daniel's father installed security cameras in the house. Everything remained normal for some time. Then another incident happened that made the family even more uneasy. One day, while landscaping work was being done in the backyard, one of the workers noticed a tiny camera hidden inside the bushes. It was so small that it could easily be missed from a distance. The battery was dead, and there was no memory card inside. This meant that if it had been active, it might have been transmitting live footage to a nearby device. The family had no idea when or who had installed it. They reported it to the police, but no clear answers were found. Time passed, and the family returned to normal life. Then another strange thing happened. Their next-door neighbors suddenly sold their house, and new owners moved in. A young couple moved into the house. Daniel noticed that sometimes late at night, someone would stand in the top-floor window and look toward their backyard. At first, he ignored it, but one night, While walking his dog, he looked into the neighbor's kitchen and saw a third person sitting at the table with a couple. The man looked very different. He was bald, had a strong build, and very thick eyebrows. Daniel clearly saw his face. At that time, he did not think much of it. But years later, when Daniel went on a trip to Paris with his family, in a random bar, he saw a familiar face. It was the exact same man. Same bald head, same strong build, same thick eyebrows. Daniel stared at him for a few seconds. Then the man looked back at Daniel. Their eyes met. Without saying anything, the man stood up from his seat and left the bar. Daniel followed him, but he had disappeared. That moment made Daniel seriously think that maybe these incidents were not random, and perhaps someone had been watching their family for a very long time. But the scariest part was, to this day, Daniel still does not know who those people were or what they wanted. My name is Michael Carter, and what happened in 2018 is something I still think about. It didn't start in a dramatic way. In fact, it began with a completely ordinary evening. Earlier that day, I had received some stressful news, and my mind wouldn't settle. Whenever that happens, I usually go outside and clear my head. So around 8 p.m., I decided to go for a hike near the trails close to Angel National Forest. I've spent years in that area, so I know the paths well. Normally, I feel completely at ease there. But that night felt different almost immediately. The fog was thicker than usual. Visibility dropped to about 20 feet, maybe less in some areas. The air felt heavy. At first, I tried using my flashlight, but the beam just reflected off the fog and made it harder to see. So I turned it off and relied on ambient light. About an hour into the hike, I noticed a smell. It was faint but distinct, something floral, almost like perfume. It didn't belong in the middle of a forest. I stopped walking for a moment, trying to figure out where it was coming from, but within seconds, it disappeared. Not long after, I caught another scent, campfire smoke. That seemed more reasonable. I assumed someone might be camping somewhere off the trail. Still, the smell was strange because it faded almost as quickly as it had appeared. Then came a third scent, herbal and earthy. It felt oddly familiar, but I couldn't place it. The combination of these sudden, shifting smells made me increasingly uneasy. A few minutes later, I noticed a flashlight beam on the ridge to my left. The ridge was significantly higher than the main trail, and I knew there were no official paths leading up to that point. Getting there would require serious climbing through rough terrain. The light wasn't steady. It would turn on, sweep across a section of the ridge, and then switch off. After a few seconds, it would appear somewhere else, as if someone was actively scanning the area. That's when I decided to turn my music off. As soon as the forest went quiet, I heard something else. Whistling. It wasn't random wind. It was clearly human. That realization changed everything. If they could hear my music, they already knew I was there. I continued walking toward a nearby overlook I was familiar with, telling myself I would think clearly once I reached it. When I arrived, I noticed something unexpected, a stone sculpture placed on a flat rock near the edge. I knew enough about that area to understand what it meant. Seeing that sculpture immediately made me decide to leave. I turned around to head back. That's when I heard footsteps. They were fast, clear, human. The sound was coming directly from the direction I needed to go in order to return to my car. I stopped moving. The footsteps came closer, then suddenly stopped. I waited in complete silence. The fog was so thick that I couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. I felt exposed, but I couldn't see anyone. To protect myself, I pulled out the small switchblade I carried. Nothing happened. No movement. No shadows. No sound. The problem was simple. The only way back was through the direction the footsteps had come from. There was no alternate route. Eventually, I had no choice but to move forward. As I walked, I kept feeling like someone was nearby, matching my pace from behind. Every few minutes, I would pause and listen, but all I could hear was a fog and my own breathing. Then, suddenly, there was a loud crashing sound in the bushes behind me. It was close. The noise startled me so badly that I instinctively turned around. But again, nothing visible. Only fog. That's when I started running. I didn't look back. I just ran. The entire time, I could hear movement behind me. Branches breaking, bushes shaking, something following. I didn't stop until I reached my car. Once inside, I locked the doors and sat there trying to calm down. After that night, I didn't return to hiking for months. And even now, I still don't have a clear explanation for what was out there in the fog. This incident happened in 2006, when I was 15 years old. My name is Daniel Harris. At that time, my parents were going through a divorce, and the atmosphere at home was extremely stressful. To help me stay away from all of that, my mom decided that I should stay for a few weeks with my great-aunt Lucy Morgan in upstate Vermont. I didn't know Lucy very well, but I didn't really have a choice. Aunt Lucy lived in an old Victorian building that had been converted into apartments in the 1960s. She lived on the ground floor, while the upper floors were rented out to tenants. The house was beautiful, high ceilings, wooden floors, and a classic design. From the beginning, I noticed something strange. Aunt Lucy avoided certain areas of the house. Her master bedroom was very large, but she never slept there. Instead, she chose to sleep in a small den near the living room. When I asked her why, she said that the master bedroom got too much morning sunlight. I jokingly asked if I could sleep there instead, but her reaction was serious and slightly cold. After that, I stayed quiet. A few days later, I started hearing footsteps coming from upstairs at night. The sound followed the same pattern every day, like someone pacing inside the building. By the end of 2006, I decided to talk to Aunt Lucy about it. She told me that the second floor had been completely vacant for the past month. I was shocked. I insisted that I heard footsteps every night, but she dismissed it as the building settling. The explanation didn't make sense to me, but I didn't argue. The next morning in September 2006, I asked if I could see the second floor. She was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. The floor was completely empty. However, on the hardwood floors, there were fresh scuff marks. The marks formed a clear walking pattern, exactly matching the direction of the footsteps I had been hearing. When I pointed this out, she said the marks were probably left by previous tenants. But the marks looked recent. That night, while we were watching a movie, the footsteps started again. I expected her to react, but instead she turned up the TV volume and ignored it completely. The next night, at 2 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. As I walked back, I noticed the staircase door was slightly open, and I could see faint moving light upstairs, like someone walking with a flashlight. I felt extremely uneasy, but the next morning I didn't say anything. I just wanted to leave as soon as possible. After I returned home, my mom refused to discuss the situation. Later, a cousin told me that in the 1990s, there had been an unclear incident in the building where someone had died. The family had tried to keep it quiet. I don't believe in ghosts. I always try to find logical explanations. Maybe someone was secretly staying there. Maybe there was blackmail involved. Or maybe the story was incomplete. But one thing is clear, my mom knew something and she never told me.